Part 1. Let's say one morning you roll out of bed and start to see your daily grind with fresh eyes, almost as if you're a stranger in your own life.
The alarm blares, you groggily brush your teeth, scarf down some breakfast, head out to work, return home, crash into bed, and then it's rinse and repeat the next day. Out of nowhere, you get hit by this thought. Why am I doing all this?
What's the end game? Does any of this even matter? Suddenly, all the comfortable little routines and assumptions that usually guide you through your day seem flimsy and unconvincing. This is what Camus calls the dawn of absurd awareness. It sneaks up on you when you're least prepared. Imagine a high-flying business executive. One day, he might find himself questioning why he's burning the midnight oil, stocking up cash he doesn't really need.
Or take a devoted parent who could start wondering whether all that effort spent on the kids really makes a dent in a universe that's just going to fizzle out in the end. Even a person of deep faith might catch themselves wondering if anyone up there is even listening to their prayers.
These thoughts aren't signs of a cracked mind. They're brief peeks at a fundamental truth about life that we tend to sweep under the rug. Camus spells out this realization with painful clarity.
He describes a guy gazing into a phone booth window, feeling like a stranger in his own skin. There's the office drone who, while looking at a calendar, is gripped by the chilling thought that he's got 30 more years of punching the clock ahead of him. Or how about those times when familiar places suddenly seem alien, and those closest to you feel like strangers in a script you no longer understand? All of these moments share a common thread, a sudden unraveling of the meanings and purposes that usually keep our lives feeling stable and worthwhile. But what exactly does Camus mean by this absurdity that's so crucial to our existence?
It's easy to mistake it for thinking life is just a big joke or inherently useless. But that's not quite it. Camus is highlighting a far more nuanced and daunting reality. The absurd doesn't come from the world alone or just from our own heads. It creeps in when our deep craving for explanation, purpose, and ultimate significance runs smack dab into the world's deafening silence. We're wired to seek out reasons for why we're here, how we should live, and whether our actions leave a lasting mark. But the world simply doesn't offer up answers. Picture it like this: a cosmic chat where we're the only ones talking. We toss out questions to the universe like, what's my purpose? Is there fairness? What happens when we die? Do my decisions matter? And what's the comeback? Zilch, not a peep, just an indifferent silence from something that can never give the kind of explanations we're after. The absurd is born in this gap, where our questions meet with universal quietude. Camus digs into this concept using the myth of Sisyphus. In Greek lore, Sisyphus is a king doomed by the gods to roll a boulder up a hill, only for it to tumble back down each time he nears the top. Looks like a tale of punishment and futility, but Camus sees more. Sisyphus stands for anyone who carries on living, toiling, and loving, fully aware that death will eventually erase all their efforts. We build careers that end when we retire or die. We raise kids who face their own hurdles. We create art and pen books that might someday be forgotten. We forge relationships that death will sever. Yet each day we continue pushing our boulder up that hill. What's vital to grasp here is that coming to terms with this absurdity is just the beginning of genuine living. Most folks, when they get a whiff of life's absurd nature, quickly dart back to denial or distraction. They might bury themselves deeper in work, lean into religious beliefs that promise ultimate answers, or grow cynical and check out. But Camus throws out a different option. Face the absurd head-on and choose to live life deliberately regardless. Even though our lives don't carry any monumental cosmic weight, they can still be meaningful to us. We might realize that we won't get all the answers to our big questions, but we can choose to live with passion and stay present. This is what Camus refers to when he talks about living without appeal. It means not looking for approval from outside sources, whether they're gods, philosophies, or political beliefs, to justify our existence or to hand us a ready-made purpose. We take responsibility ourselves to craft whatever meaning and value our lives will have. Adopting this mindset isn't simple, since it doesn't promise that everything will fall into place eventually. But it does offer something precious, the chance to live with complete honesty and authenticity. Once we abandon the belief in a pre-established meaning of life, we're free to explore and find whatever meaning is truly there. Recognizing the absurd also highlights a key part of being human. We alone can question the meaning of our circumstances. A tree just grows toward the sun without wondering why, and a lion hunts without questioning what it all means. Humans, on the other hand, can look at their own lives as if from the outside, finding parts of it perplexing or random. This ability to reflect is both a gift and a burden. It traps us in the absurd, making us aware of our strange position, yet it allows for conscious choices and real defiance against the typical way of things. Camus notes that this sense of absurdity isn't always with us. Most of our time is occupied with everyday activities, paying bills, enjoying meals with friends, getting angry in traffic, diving into a good book, or appreciating beautiful music. These thoughts mostly hit us during quieter moments when we step back from our daily routines to ponder life, like while commuting or doing the dishes, when our minds start wandering. They might strike during big life changes, when our usual understanding becomes unstable, or when faced with death, whether it's our own impending end or the passing of someone we love. Camus warns against dismissing these thoughts as just depression or a phase of neurosis. He argues that recognizing life's absurdity can serve as a philosophical wake-up call, giving us a sharp, clear view beyond the comforting stories we tell ourselves. Although these insights can be unsettling because they unearth uncomfortable truths, they peel back the layers of conventional narratives about progress, purpose, and ultimate meaning. They serve to remind us of basic truths about human existence. We are temporary inhabitants in a vast and uncaring universe, and eventually our lives will end without fanfare. But embracing these truths doesn't need to leave us in despair. Instead, they can form the foundation for a more genuine and ultimately satisfying way of living. Part 2. Okay, so now that we've wrapped our heads around what Camus meant by the absurd, let's circle back to Sisyphus, this guy from ancient stories who ended up with what feels like the ultimate dead-end task, represents human dignity in the face of life's seemingly pointless challenges, according to Camus. But why does some dude from Greek myths matter to us in the 21st century? What's his story got to say to us now?
Camus has this genius way of turning our ideas of winning and losing on their heads. On the surface, Sisyphus looks like a total loser. The gods really got him good, took everything he had, and now he's stuck with the most repetitive, pointless task you can imagine. Every day he pushes this huge rock up a hill, gets there, then watches it tumble back down. If you think success is seeing results that last, Sisyphus seems like the ultimate failure. But Camus wants us to focus on that moment when Sisyphus heads back down to start all over. That tiny pause, that brief moment before he starts pushing again. In that moment, Sisyphus is way ahead of the rock because he has a level of awareness the rock will never have. He knows the drill: more struggle, brief success, inevitable disappointment. He doesn't kid himself into expecting any different outcome, but he still goes back for more. And it's in that decision to keep going that Camus finds something truly extraordinary. Seeing Sisyphus as a hero means understanding what he's let go of and what he's clung to. He's ditched conventional hope. He's no longer banking on the gods cutting him some slack, his rock staying put, or a big shift happening. He's given up on lasting successes, but held on to something way more valuable: his power to choose. Every day he could walk away from the boulder, choose defeat, rage against the gods, or try to escape. But instead, he chooses to take on his task, full throttle. That changes everything. Sisyphus stops being at the mercy of external forces. He's taking the reins of his own existence. What was a punishment turns into a purpose. The futility becomes freedom. Without anyone setting the standards for success or needing public approval, Sisyphus can find his own reasons to keep going. Maybe it's feeling the warm sun while he works. Maybe it's appreciating his own strength and the flow of his breath. He can savor the view from the top, even if just for a flash. He can find joy in giving his best, regardless of the outcome. When Camus tells us we should picture Sisyphus being happy, it might sound like he's joking. How could anyone be happy, stuck in an endless loop of meaningless work? But Camus isn't just messing around. He's pointing out a profound truth about fulfillment. We often think happiness comes from reaching goals, acquiring what we desire, or making lasting changes. But Sisyphus shows us a different path, finding joy in fully committing to whatever life brings us. Think about your own life. Recall moments when you were totally absorbed, whether playing a sport, getting lost in a creative project, or having a deep conversation with someone you care about. During those times, you probably weren't focused on the final outcome or long-term rewards. You were just there, fully engaged, living in the moment. That's the level of engagement Camus sees in Sisyphus. The rock isn't just a hurdle to happiness, it's a chance to dive into life just the way it is. And this ties into a key insight Camus had about human nature. We're not really wired to always achieve some ultimate goal to feel fulfilled. Instead, we need to feel genuinely ourselves, make real choices, and fully engage with whatever comes our way. The real downer in modern life isn't that we don't live forever or matter in some grand cosmic scheme. It's that we don't live fully in the time we've got. We burn so much energy chasing future dreams or fixating on past mistakes that we miss the simple joy of living right now. Take Sisyphus, for instance. His story gives us a fresh perspective on how to be human. He shows us that we don't need others to validate our worth or to find some grand reason to justify our existence.
It's not about having glorious circumstances, but about how we handle whatever life throws our way. Sisyphus reveals that one can still be truly human even when stripped of all the things we usually think give life its meaning.
For Sisyphus, what initially seems like eternal punishment turns into a kind of freedom from proving his worth to anyone, including the gods who cursed him. Albert Camus, who tells Sisyphus's tale, doesn't sugarcoat his reality. He doesn't proclaim that suffering is beneficial or suggest we should search for meaningfulness in pointless tasks. The idea isn't that meaningless tasks are valuable just because. Rather, we can give them value through our attitudes and decisions. Sisyphus doesn't get to choose his circumstances, but he can decide how he feels about them. While he can't control everything happening around him, he has control over his reaction, finding a sort of freedom no one can take away. Camus calls this revolt, a cornerstone of his philosophy. Revolt isn't necessarily about violent protests or shouting from rooftops, though it could include that. It's more about not letting life's uncontrollable events defeat you, maintaining your dignity, and keeping your freedom to choose, even if those choices seem insignificant. Sisyphus doesn't rebel by trying to escape his punishment or fight the gods. He stays resilient by not letting his situation break his spirit. He stays fully human precisely where everything attempts to strip him of his humanity. The image of Sisyphus eternally pushing that huge boulder speaks to the repetitive nature of life. We all have our own boulders, those daily tasks that need constant attention, those issues that keep resurfacing, the challenges that never seem to end. We go to work, return home, and do it all over again. We clean our homes only for them to get messy once more, solve one problem and another pops up. We nurture relationships, and they constantly require care.
If you look at it from one angle, this repetition can feel dreary, like we're trapped in endless cycles.
But through Sisyphus's perspective, these repetitions offer us opportunities to tackle frequent challenges with a fresh outlook and to appreciate simply being alive to face another day. Part 3. Albert Camus, when he looked at the absurdity of life, saw that people generally reacted in one of three ways. Understanding these responses is crucial because the choice we make completely alters how we live. Each choice offers a different way to deal with the clash between what we want from life and the universe not really caring. Every route comes with its own logic, allure, and consequences. The first option is suicide, and Camus considers this the most significant philosophical question. When someone realizes that life may have no ultimate meaning, that their efforts might be pointless, and all they've done will be erased by death, some might decide there's no point in continuing. If life's absurd, why not just give up? Without a grand purpose, divine plan, or ultimate justice to make life's struggles meaningful, why endure the pain? This idea is logical in a way. If meaning makes life worth living and life is meaningless, maybe it's not worth it. But Camus is strongly against this. He argues that suicide misinterprets what absurdity really tells us about life. To him, the absurd doesn't mean life is worthless. It means we need a new way to look at living. Realizing our existence isn't validated from the outside allows us to create our own reasons for living.
Instead of getting ready-made purposes from some higher power, we can choose our own. The universe might lack inherent meaning, but that doesn't mean life is meaningless. Meaning can and should come from us, not some divine source. Additionally, Camus points out that suicide contradicts the urge that made us aware of absurdity. We see life as absurd because we deeply care about meaning and purpose. Our realization that life is absurd comes from our strong desire to understand our place in the world. Ending it all because of this frustration abandons what makes us human, the ability to question, explore, and push back against simple answers. Suicide kills the absurd by eliminating the consciousness that perceives it, but it's like solving a puzzle by throwing away the puzzle. The second option is what Camus terms philosophical suicide, and he sees it as more prevalent and potentially more detrimental than physical suicide. This occurs when people, unable to bear the weight of absurdity, jump to some faith that promises to resolve the conflict between our desires and the universe's silence. This faith might be religious, like believing in a God who gives life ultimate meaning. It might be political, believing in historical progress leading to a utopia. Or it could be metaphysical, relying on a cosmic order that makes everything sensible. What these beliefs share is a refusal to live with uncertainty, clinging to the idea that ultimate answers exist. Camus notes the allure of philosophical suicide. Living with absurdity isn't easy. It demands we act without guarantees, make choices in uncertainty, and commit to potentially meaningless projects and relationships. Faith in a divine plan or historical justice or a lovingly ordered universe is comforting. These beliefs guide us, offer solace during tough times, and provide hope for the future. They suggest that our struggles are part of something bigger, that our pain has reason, and that everything will work out. However, Camus argues that this is fundamentally dishonest. It betrays the same intelligence that led to the understanding of the absurd. We cannot unlearn what we know about the universe's indifference. We can't simply force ourselves to believe in something our reason tells us is false or unprovable. Taking a leap of faith means abandoning the critical thinking that makes us human. It's like trying to make darkness light by closing your eyes. It might bring peace of mind, but it compromises intellectual honesty and stops us from engaging with the world as it is. Camus has a real bone to pick with existential thinkers like Kierkegaard and Jaspers. These guys admit that life's pretty absurd, but then lean on religious faith to cope. To Camus, that's a bunch of contradictions. It's like you're using logic to highlight how logic falls short, but then ditching it when the conclusions start to pinch a bit. He's not thrilled about political ideologies either, the ones that claim they'll fix all human issues through some big revolution. These movements may start out tackling injustice and suffering head-on, but then they concoct elaborate theories about historical progress that end up resembling secular religions. They urge us to sacrifice today's happiness for some utopian tomorrow, accepting current struggles as necessary for future paradise. In Camus's view, these ideologies are just other ways people avoid facing real life head-on. Camus isn't down with those roads. He suggests a different path: revolt. This idea of revolt means saying no to dodging life's absurdity, not by running away through suicide or clinging to false hopes,
but by living in that constant push and pull between what we need and the world's lack of answers. It's about refusing to let life's absurdity get you down, while also acknowledging that this absurdity is simply part of being human. Revolt isn't quitting or rebelling, it's more nuanced, choosing realness within the limits we can't avoid. For Camus, revolt starts with seeing things clearly, recognizing our true situation. We're just temporary creatures in a massive universe that doesn't seem to care about us. We're all going to die, our loved ones too, and eventually our species and the entire universe will meet their end. Our actions won't have lasting cosmic results, and our achievements aren't forever. Pain isn't part of some grand cosmic scheme. These truths might sting, but they're the real deal. Revolt kicks off by staring these facts right in the face. But it's not just about seeing things clearly. Once you've wrapped your head around life's core absurdity, the next move is to choose life anyway, and not just live, but live with gusto and passion. You dive into life, not shy away from commitments or relationships. It's about going all in, knowing full well this is it. No afterlife to balance today's hardships, no historical narrative justifying current sacrifices. Every moment counts precisely because it doesn't mean anything bigger than itself. Revolt is also about building values, as Camus puts it. Without external sources to spoon-feed us purpose, it's up to us to craft our own meanings. That doesn't mean anything goes. It's shaped by our human nature and shared planetary home. We can't just make up values on a whim because some help us thrive while others don't. But within those bounds, we've got real freedom to decide what matters, where we'll commit, and how we'll spend our limited time. This freedom can be both exhilarating and terrifying because it means we're wholly responsible for the shape our lives take. Part 5. Now, when Camus talks about rebellion, he's not envisioning angry mobs or fiery protests. No, he's pointing to something much deeper and significantly more transformative. It's that inherent human move to stand up in a universe that feels indifferent toward us. For Camus, rebellion is what truly distinguishes us as human beings. He describes a rebel as someone who simply says no. But this doesn't mean they're just against things out of negativity. That no is directed at certain things, all the while loudly affirming yes to the values those things threaten. Think of a slave who finally refuses to follow an order, not just to be defiant, but to draw a line, asserting their dignity, rights, and true essence. So, when you hear no, there's a powerful yes beneath it to something much more meaningful than just going with the flow. Rebellion's really about zeroing in on what truly matters by identifying what you just can't put up with. It reveals what you're truly about by showing what you stand against. Someone who's never pushed back hasn't fully grasped their own beliefs. If you just take things as they come, how'll you ever know what's important to you? Rebellion clarifies where you stand and drives you to own your decisions. But now, here's Camus' big twist. Real rebellion isn't just about personal gain. When a slave rises, they're not solely fighting for their own rights. They're raising their voice for anyone facing similar struggles. They're giving a resounding no to all unjust treatment, not just theirs. Their fight for their dignity becomes a call for human dignity everywhere. Camus has this aha moment. Rebellion naturally fosters togetherness.
A rebel realizes they're not isolated. Others share their fights and deserve the same respect. Moving from I resist to we stand isn't just an upgrade, it's a natural transition. If my rebellion is about human values and not just personal whims, I must back others battling for the same reasons. If I want dignity, I have to acknowledge it in others too. If I can't tolerate certain conditions for myself, I can't turn a blind eye when others face them. This takes rebellion beyond individual concerns into broader social and political landscapes. A genuine rebel can't just improve things for themselves while others face hardships. They can't shout for their rights while ignoring others. They can't battle oppression in one area and permit it in another. True rebellion drives us to work towards a society where everyone's dignity is recognized and honored, holding us accountable not just for ourselves, but for building a world where authenticity is a shared reality for everyone. Yet, Camus draws a line between genuine rebellion and those who want to overhaul reality completely. Rebels recognize limits and work within our human boundaries to make improvements without craving a complete upheaval. Revolutionaries, in contrast, often aim for this utopia of perfect justice or absolute freedom, wanting to start from scratch instead of fixing the issue. They start seeing people more as cogs in this grand ideal, overlooking their individuality. This distinction is crucial to understanding Camus' political leanings. He supports standing against injustice and needless suffering. He believes firmly in people's right and duty to challenge situations that strip away their self-worth. But he's wary of those radical movements that claim they'll solve all of humanity's troubles by overhauling society. He's seen that such movements often end up replacing old miseries with new, sometimes worse forms of oppression. While the rebel seeks improvements within the existing framework, the revolutionary dreams of starting over entirely. The true rebel knows their fight isn't perfect and doesn't pretend to have all the answers or that their cause is bulletproof. They're open to criticism, ready to admit mistakes, and willing to change their stance if faced with new, compelling evidence. They understand rebellion isn't a one-time deal, but an ongoing way to live. This humility is what keeps true rebellion grounded in the messy reality of human lives, setting it apart from fanaticism. Camus dives into the tale of figures from the early 1900s Russian Revolution movement, guys like Ivan Kalyaev and his crew, to drive his point home. These revolutionaries believed that bumping off government bigwigs was a necessary step to drive justice forward. Yet, they were equally convinced that taking a life was a serious, weighty act that demanded a significant trade-off. Every time they committed a killing, they were ready to lay down their own lives as compensation. They didn't hide behind justifications like fate or the rights of the revolution. Instead, they took on the moral weight and were ready to deal with what came next. For them, exchanging their lives for those they ended was part of the deal. Camus sees them as fastidious assassins because even amidst violence they saw as essential, they clung to their moral doubts. They never dulled themselves to the act of killing or considered human lives as expendable. Their targets were always those wielding power, and they were careful to spare the innocent. Importantly, they never claimed that their mission justified every possible means, nor that any end result would make their actions right. They stuck with being rebels rather than transitioning fully into revolutionaries, because they never let go of the human values that fueled their fight. This narrative feeds into Camus's concept of measured rebellion. True rebellion never loses sight of its core, which is a respect for human honor, even when dealing with opponents. It understands that what we do when pursuing our aims becomes a part of those aims. It realizes that you can't craft compassion from the foundation of cruelty. It demands adherence to ethical lines, even if those lines make reaching goals harder or less sure. It opts for staying human over striving for unchecked dominion, operating within boundaries rather than trampling over them. Part 4. Diving into Camus' take on false hope and finding freedom. Camus thinks this thing called philosophical suicide is like majorly dangerous, so to really get why he's worried, we have to dig into the ways it pops up and why it's always a bit of a letdown. People have this natural urge to find some deep meaning in life, right? And whole societies have been created to scratch that itch. But Camus argues that these so-called fixes, even when they're well-meant, just don't cut it. Take religion, for example. When life feels like it's missing a purpose and the universe seems not to care, religion jumps in with this really tempting offer. It says, "Hey, God's got a master plan." It reassures you that your struggles aren't just random. You matter because you're loved by this big creator. Death? That's not the end. Just a passage to an afterlife where all your big questions get answered and all your hurts are healed. Perfect justice is promised, though maybe not in this lifetime. All the hardships and sacrifices you go through are supposedly pieces of a grand cosmic story leading to ultimate truth and goodness. Admittedly, that's really comforting. Religious faith takes all the chaos and makes it look meaningful. Pain turns into an essential step. Death, just an illusion, and your life gains cosmic significance. You get a divine manual on how to live and a community that sees the world the same way you do. With faith, every good act matters, every kindness is remembered, and every wrong will be righted someday. But here's where Camus drops the bombshell. He believes this whole deal demands a steep price. Religion asks you to bet on stuff that lacks solid proof and sometimes even goes against what we understand about reality. You're expected to trust in a loving logic behind seemingly random events. Natural disasters, diseases, and human evils are all supposed to fit into God's grand plan. Plus, it requires accepting that an all-good, all-powerful deity allows innocent suffering for reasons beyond human understanding. Sure, this can calm your nerves, but it also puts a cap on the very reasoning that woke you up to life's absurdity. Additionally, religious faith might make you hit pause on living fully in the here and now. If this life is just a practice run for the next one, the focus might shift to enduring instead of truly experiencing today. If pain is considered enlightening and joy could be a distraction, then happiness is something you might start to question. If truth comes from belief instead of personal discovery, you might rely more on authority than personal experiences. Camus suggests this can lead people to check out from reality, avoiding the real challenge of living life as it is. Now, think about political ideologies as kind of like secular religions. They come along with their own promises of life's ultimate purpose. Like Marxism, it claims we're heading towards a classless society where alienation disappears and we all enjoy true freedom. Fascism talks about resurrecting national pride and purity, bringing order to a chaotic world. Then there's liberal progressivism, which assures us that reason and science will eventually fix all human issues, creating a fair and prosperous world for everyone. Each of these grand narratives addresses real human concerns, critiques of the current state of things, and dreams for a better future. They turn these ideas into epic stories about the supposed direction of history and inevitable progress. Much like religious beliefs, political ideologies dish out firm answers to life's absurdity. They clarify why the world is as it is and make strong predictions about where we're headed. They let people feel like they're part of something much bigger, a significant shift in history that'll keep moving forward long after they're gone. They set out strict rules, telling us who's right and who's wrong, who's keeping up with the world, and who's stuck in the past, who's a friend and who's not. They assure us that the struggles we're dealing with now will make sense when the victories roll in. They gather groups of loyal followers who share a hopeful vision of where humanity might be headed. But Camus warns us that political beliefs can be just as tricky as religious ones when they turn into ways to avoid facing life's chaos. These beliefs often ask us to accept ideas about people and history that aren't backed by solid proof. They encourage us to give up what we have now for future rewards that may never materialize. They often justify terrible deeds in the name of lofty goals. They draw sharp lines between good and bad, us and them, the wise and the clueless. The real danger, Camus says, is they can lead to what he calls logical murder, where real people end up dead because of abstract ideas. Both religious and political outlooks often overpromise. They claim to have all the answers to life's biggest questions, questions that might not even have answers. They offer certainty in a world that naturally leans towards doubt. They give universal thumbs up to our actions that might not need outside approval at all. In doing so, they make us act as though we know things we don't, as if we have insights beyond our human limits. Camus isn't saying that all religious or political beliefs are by definition wrong or bad. He agrees that individuals can hold these beliefs while still being aware of their limitations and uncertainties. His critique targets the habit of turning beliefs into all-encompassing systems that pretend to solve every problem and inner conflict. He argues against using faith or ideology as a shortcut to escape the tough job of living honestly with life's uncertainties. He critiques any belief system that asks us to shut off our minds or dampen our ability to think critically. Camus offers a simpler, yet more authentic way forward. Instead of searching for ultimate answers, we could learn to appreciate living with our questions. We could take on the challenge of creating our own values instead of relying on outside approval for our choices. Instead of dodging the realities of human life, we could embrace them fully. This approach doesn't promise easy answers or lasting peace, but it offers something truly invaluable, an opportunity to live with complete honesty and intellectual bravery. It lets us stay true to our own experiences while deeply engaging with the people and projects we truly care about. Part 6. All right, let's dig into what makes Albert Camus' take on life's absurdities so compelling. He ties the struggle we all face against life's randomness to a broader need for connection and standing up for justice. It isn't just a hop from one random thought to another. Nope, It's a more organic flow rooted in the essence of true rebellion. Think about it. When you fight against your own struggles, something clicks. You realize others are dealing with the same stuff. Picture a worker sick and tired of unsafe working conditions who decides to take a stand. Soon enough, they see others in the same boat. Or a student refusing to put up with unfair treatment from those in charge will quickly notice they're not the only one. When someone calls out government corruption, they see how deeply it affects everyone. So, what starts as a personal fight unveils wider social injustices and hidden oppression. But it's not just about you or your close surroundings. Rebellion digs into the core of what it means to be human, extending beyond just one person's situation. It's not merely about saying, "I deserve better," but more like insisting, "Anyone in my shoes deserves better too." It's about pushing past self-interest and embracing a shared sense of human dignity. When rebellion is genuine, it lines up with principles that apply to everyone. Camus captures this idea beautifully with, "I rebel, therefore we exist." It's a clever twist on Descartes' "I think, therefore I am," pointing to the truth that we're bound by shared values and common struggles. Rebellion isn't just shouting, "I'm here," but more like a collective recognition, we're all facing this together. It pushes back against the notion of humans as isolated beings and sees us as part of a larger community, all seeking dignity and respect and looking for life's meaning. This bond Camus describes isn't built on shared histories or cultures. It's a deeper connection. It's about us as aware beings in a world that doesn't dish out easy answers. We all face mortality. We all ask big questions without getting clear responses. We're all navigating life without a manual. We're all choosing between despair, false hope, and honest rebellion. This shared human experience creates what Camus calls metaphysical solidarity, a powerful link that crosses over the differences that usually divide us. But this connection isn't just a lofty, abstract idea floating around. It's real and impacts how we should treat one another and organize our societies. If we all share basic human experiences and deserve core respect, we can't support systems that only favor a few while sidelining others. True rebellion that fights for universal values naturally includes a responsibility to support those battling for the same reasons we do. If we assert certain rights, it's only fair those rights extend to everyone in our human family. So Camus invites us into what he terms the ethics of rebellion. This isn't built on religious teachings or detached theories about human nature. No way. It comes straight from the genuine experience of rejecting what's unacceptable and holding tight to our core values. It's rooted in everyday life and the real experiences we face. It grows from taking action rather than just talking about it, focusing on actual human needs instead of drifting off into high-minded ideas. As a result, this rebellion brings distinct qualities. First, it's grounded and humble in its approach. It doesn't promise to solve every human problem or eradicate suffering entirely. It acknowledges that life has its share of tragedy, loss, and an end we can't escape with any social change or personal effort. The aim is to reduce unnecessary pain without claiming we can eliminate it. It seeks to open up more opportunities for people to live with dignity, but stop short of claiming we can achieve a perfect state of dignity. Basically, The idea behind rebellion ethics is this. It's a global concept, but it really comes down to acting in specific areas.
It pushes the idea that everyone deserves to be treated with respect and fairness. But it also knows that this respect has to come from real, tangible actions in the real world.
It's based on a few main beliefs, like the importance of dignity, cutting down on suffering, and keeping freedom safe. But it doesn't provide a strict guide for how to apply these everywhere. Instead, it suggests using some common sense and constantly making choices, rather than sticking to a rigid rule book. The ethics of rebellion also has a built-in self-regulator. It recognizes that if rebels forget the core values that triggered their revolt initially, they could turn into oppressors themselves. The approach to achieving goals needs to match the goals themselves. In other words, we can't hope to create a kinder place by using cruel methods. It has internal safeguards against extremism that sacrifice present well-being for a future ideal. Rebellion is seen as an ongoing process, more like a lifestyle than a one-off act or an endpoint. It's a journey, not a destination. Each new generation needs to figure out what they refuse to accept and what they believe is worth fighting for. People must learn through their own experiences what it truly means to live an authentic and moral life. This view of ethics can't simply be neatly passed down from one generation to the next. It must be revitalized and reshaped to suit the times. This perspective on ethics is significant for politics and societal structures. Camus appreciates democratic institutions for their ability to provide constant checks against the misuse of power, not because they're perfect. He defends free speech, not because every idea is equally valid, but because having the freedom to dissent is vital to maintaining human dignity. He advocates for individual rights, not because individuals are more important than the community, but because protecting individuals is essential to upholding the community's fundamental values. His political views are more about practical solutions than lofty goals, focused on improving things rather than completely revolutionizing, and aim to reduce harm rather than chase an unattainable perfection. Part 7. When Albert Camus was crafting his ideas on rebellion, he grew more cautious about how true rebellion could slip into this dangerous territory of full-blown revolution. This distinction is crucial because it shapes how we attempt to challenge unfairness and hardship without ourselves turning tyrannical. Rebellion is all about addressing specific grievances. A rebel stands up against certain actions, laws, or abuses of power. They're focused on specific changes, not overhauling the whole world, striving for a kinder existence within the current system rather than flipping it on its head. Rebels are realists, knowing perfect justice is a fantasy, but pushing for more justice is totally doable. They're aware of their limited vision, flawed tactics, and the uncertain road to success. Revolutionaries, however, get caught up in the dream of sweeping change. They aren't content with tweaking the system. They want to build a new one from scratch. They don't just want less suffering. They're dreaming of a world without any. Instead of a little more freedom, they crave unlimited freedom. They're not after increased justice, but absolute justice. Revolutions tend to ignore the boundaries that keep rebellion grounded, imagining endless possibilities and utopian solutions. Camus saw this unravel in the tale of modern revolutions, especially looking at the French and Russian examples.
Both kicked off with justified outrage at real oppression. Both were inspired by a true desire for protecting human dignity and ensuring social justice. Loads of idealistic folks jumped on board, ready to put aside their self-interests for a better future. Yet, both revolutions eventually spiraled into a hunt for total change, birthing new oppressions that sometimes overshadowed the original problems. Take the French Revolution, which began with demands for basic political rights, fair economies, and social equity, reasonable and important aspirations. But then, the revolutionaries got ambitious, believing that more than just political shifts were needed. They started thinking that making a just society meant wiping the slate clean. Institutions, traditions, even ways of thinking became obstacles to bulldoze rather than issues to resolve. They started from the view that if an old way is entirely corrupt, a new way would be spotless, so anyone sticking to the old or questioning the new became an adversary to eliminate. It became the logic of the guillotine. When change becomes this all-consuming moral crusade, opposition is seen as pure evil and worth no mercy. Revolutionaries slipped into believing their cause was so virtuous that any measures taken were justified. In their zeal, they forgot the human principles that sparked their rebellion, sacrificing real lives for their ideals. The Russian Revolution took a similar path. It began with serious complaints against a cruel, bumbling czarist rule. Russian people were bogged down by poverty, political oppression, and social inequality that demanded change. The Bolsheviks promised to build a society without class struggle, free from exploitation and estrangement. In their effort to free humanity, they envisioned a world without the conflicts and pains that have plagued people throughout history. But striving for this utopian society meant doing things that actually clashed with their core ideals. Lenin and his crew figured that to achieve a classless society, they needed to tear down the existing class structures. This meant not just shaking up the economic scene, but also eliminating whole groups they labeled as enemies of the class. Folks like the kulaks, the bourgeoisie, the aristocracy, and eventually anyone who dared to oppose party ideals found themselves targeted for removal. They defended these harsh moves by saying they were crucial for historical progress and humanity's greater good. Their argument was that a bit of short-term violence and control was okay if it meant achieving lasting peace and freedom. Yet, what was supposed to be temporary stuck around, making their so-called liberation tactics just as oppressive as what they aimed to overthrow. Camus points out that these bleak results weren't simply errors or betrayals of revolutionary goals, but rather the inevitable outcomes of revolutionary thinking. When we push for absolute fixes to human problems, we start seeing people who don't fit those fixes as issues to be resolved instead of as individuals worthy of respect. The moment we believe we know the direction of history, we use people as mere tools for achieving that future rather than valuing them for who they are. When our cause seems to embody ultimate justice, any dissent starts looking like complete injustice, not deserving any fairness. Thus, revolution generates a mindset that spirals into fanaticism and terror. On the other hand, Camus' idea of a rebel embraces a philosophy that recognizes limits. This rebel gets that human understanding has its boundaries and that perfect solutions to human problems
are just dreams. They know it's possible to make things better, but not to wipe out all problems completely. They aim to ease suffering, but understand that eradicating it entirely isn't feasible for humans. They accept their methods have faults, and that their motivations can be murky. This understanding keeps rebellion rooted in real human experiences and prevents it from going down a fanatic path. This philosophy of limits emphasizes that means and ends should align. We can't strive for a more humane world using inhumane methods. Justice can't be reached through ongoing injustice, nor can a free society spring from total oppression. How we achieve our goals gets intertwined with the goals themselves, influencing the society we create and the people we become. If we use violence, lies, and hate to combat those same things, we end up replicating what we aimed to fight. Yet, this doesn't mean rebels should never use force, or that all methods are equally valid. Camus acknowledges that sometimes violence is necessary to counter greater violence, and that deceit may occasionally be needed to challenge systemic lies. He insists, though, that such actions must be approached with reluctance, caution, and full awareness of their moral implications. Any rebel who resorts to violence should carry the weight of that violence and accept responsibility for it. They shouldn't hide behind excuses like historical necessity or abstract ideas, but instead accept that they're doing something difficult to prevent something worse. They should strive to stay human and grounded, rather than acting like gods, and appreciate there are limits they shouldn't try to completely overstep. Part 8. To get a real sense of how Albert Camus's ideas translate into the real world, we need to dive into his writings, like his novel The Stranger. In this book, Camus introduces us to a character named Meursault, who he describes as an absurd hero. Meursault lives his life without buying into some grand purpose, yet he doesn't despair over this lack. Through him, Camus captures both the freedom and the hurdles that come with living truthfully in an unfathomable world. One of the most famous lines in literature opens, "The Stranger. Today, Mother died." What hits us isn't just the fact of his mother's death, but Meursault's apparent indifference to it. He doesn't even remember whether she died today or the day before. At the funeral, he doesn't shed tears, skips traditional mourning customs, and generally doesn't react as society expects someone in mourning to react. From the very beginning, Meursault is painted as someone who doesn't adhere to society's emotional or social conventions. But Camus clarifies that Meursault's lack of emotion isn't about being heartless or mean. He cared for his mother in his own way, having looked after her as needed. He simply doesn't see the point in faking emotions he doesn't genuinely feel or following societal norms that don't resonate with him. In a world where people often pretend to feel things they don't, Meursault's honesty about his true emotions appears odd and even disquieting. This mindset continues through the first part of the book. Meursault goes to the beach, casually starts a relationship with Marie, and gets entangled in his neighbor Raymond's problems with his girlfriend. In every situation, he focuses on the here and now, without spinning everything into stories with deeper meanings or future implications. When Marie asks if he loves her, he admits, probably not. When she brings up marriage, he says it doesn't matter to him, but he's open if she desires it.
When Raymond needs help with a letter for revenge on his girlfriend, Meursault agrees without overthinking it. Again, Camus shows us that Meursault's behavior doesn't stem from a lack of morals or emotions. He enjoys spending time with Marie, feels genuine affection, and values their physical connection. He experiences life vividly, feeling the heat of the sun, the chill of the water, and the taste of food. He can be a loyal friend and is capable of kindness. What he doesn't do is turn these experiences into grand romantic or moral stories. He lives in the here and now, not constantly looking to an imagined future or dwelling on an idealized past. Things take a sharp turn when Meursault kills an Arab man on the beach. This act isn't premeditated. It unfolds in the moment, driven by a chain of events rather than clear intention. Meursault, stumbling into the encounter with the man who had earlier fought with Raymond, is overwhelmed by the sun's glare and the reflection off the man's knife. He fires, pauses, then fires again. Later, he can't even explain why he did it.
It seems as if the scene itself, sun, heat, tension, took over rather than him acting with conscious intent. In the second part of the novel, we follow Meursault's trial, where Camus reveals his story's deeper point. The legal system isn't concerned with the intricate details of the shooting or what led to it. Instead, they're obsessed with who Meursault is, particularly how he behaved during his mother's funeral. The prosecutor claims that someone who shows no emotion in such a situation is capable of anything. Meursault is on trial, not for the act of killing, but for failing to fit the roles of a grieving son and a regretful killer. During the trial, various people testify about Meursault's character. His boss mentions Meursault's lack of ambition and notes he seemed content with his position as it was. Marie shares memories of the time she and Meursault spent together, but somehow her words get turned around, making Meursault come across as cold and uncaring. The person in charge at his mom's retirement home brings up how Meursault showed no interest in looking at his mom's body and didn't even cry at her funeral. All this is used to portray him as someone who doesn't feel or act how you'd expect. The prosecutor goes as far as calling him Monsieur Antichrist, implying that his disregard for social norms makes him dangerous. Camus is using the whole courtroom drama to show how society tends to go after those who are genuine while celebrating the ones who are just good actors. If Meursault had just managed to shed some tears at the funeral, felt bad for the shooting, or given any excuse that seemed sensible like jealousy or rage, he might have gotten a lighter sentence. But he refused to play the game or tell a story that would fit the mold. So, they peg him as a total misfit. The court is baffled by his straightforwardness about how random his actions truly were, and how they didn't carry any hidden meaning. While he's killing time in jail before his final day, Meursault starts seeing things differently. A priest stops by, trying to get him to turn to faith, to find some meaning in his suffering, and brace for an afterlife where everything is supposed to make sense. But Meursault won't have it. He flat out rejects these notions and clings to his understanding of life's absurd nature. He'd rather stick with stark honesty than buy into comforting illusions. He chooses to face death with open eyes instead of living with beliefs he can't stand behind. Toward the end, Meursault finds a kind of peace. He accepts his fate without any resentment or wishful thinking. He realizes the universe doesn't give a hoot about his existence. that his life doesn't hold any grand significance, and his death won't alter anything important in the world. But recognizing this truth sets him free because it takes away the burden of having to chase a big purpose or justifying his existence. He can simply appreciate that he lived, felt, and connected in his own way, even if it was short-lived and didn't leave any lasting trace. He embraces what he calls the universe's calming indifference and finds a strange comfort in it. Through Camus' lens, Meursault is seen as an absurd hero because he lives fully within the chaos of life's absurdity. He doesn't run away from it with false hope or by ending his own life. He doesn't pretend there's meaning where there isn't or purpose where there is none. He stands by his choices, but doesn't claim that some greater power or truth made them right or wrong. He's facing death without seeking consolation, but also without succumbing to gloom. He shows what it means to be completely human, stripped of all the typical ideas of what gives life meaning. The Stranger lays bare both the appeal and difficulty of a life unclouded by lies. Meursault's openness feels like fresh air in a world full of phoniness and fake emotions. His acceptance of life's randomness is dignified and almost courageous. His refusal to fake feelings or adopt beliefs he doesn't truly have reveals a purity that's rare. But being so real isolates him and leaves him vulnerable to a society that struggles with too much honesty about the human condition. Living as an absurd hero, Camus suggests, is possible, but it's tough and comes with significant trade-offs. Part 9. In The Plague by Albert Camus, the narrative shifts away from the individual struggles seen in The Stranger to focus on how communities band together in the face of inexplicable challenges. The setting is Oran, a city in Algeria, during a harrowing outbreak of bubonic plague. Camus paints a stark picture of the epidemic's harsh reality, using it as a metaphor for any random catastrophe that throws life into chaos. The plague serves as a sharp reminder of life's unpredictability, the confines of human control, and our own mortality. The book opens with a gradual realization that something is terribly wrong in Oran. It starts with the unnerving sight of rats dying en masse, soon followed by people falling ill with mysterious symptoms that leave doctors perplexed. The local authorities are slow to confront the truth, dodging the dreaded term plague with soft words and medical terms that suggest the situation is under control and will be short-lived. But the harsh truth eventually becomes undeniable. The city is in the grip of an outbreak that will claim thousands of lives and sever the survivors from the rest of the world. Through this lens of an epidemic, Camus explores how people react to senseless disaster. For instance, there's Rambert, a journalist trapped in Oran as the lockdown begins. His first instinct is to flee from the confusion and return to Paris, where his lover is waiting. Much of his story is spent plotting ways to slip away from quarantine and resume his former life. His behavior reflects our natural tendency to dodge pain and retreat to the familiar, even when circumstances make it almost impossible. Then we have Father Panelou, a Jesuit priest who looks at the chaos through the prism of faith. He preaches that the plague is a divine punishment for sins, casting it as part of a larger spiritual narrative where good will emerge if people remain repentant and devoted. This perspective taps into our urge to fit our suffering into a meaningful story, one that aligns with notions of justice or purpose. But as the plague relentlessly claims lives, including those of innocent children, we see cracks in Father Panelou's certainty. By the end of the book, his sermons shift from claiming certainty to grappling with life's mysteries. Other characters handle the turmoil in their own unique ways, like Grand, a municipal clerk fixated on writing a novel. He spends an excessive amount of time perfecting his first sentence without making any real progress. This meticulous task becomes his retreat from the chaos of the epidemic. Grand represents those who survive adversity by narrowing their focus to small, manageable tasks. These endeavors might provide comfort and a bit of accomplishment, but also risk insulating them from facing reality head-on. The true heroes of the story, however, are those who fight the plague itself, unflinchingly accepting the monumental task even though they know it's an uphill battle. Damard, Ryu, who tells the tale, dedicates himself to treating the sick and controlling the disease's spread. Jean Tarou organizes volunteer groups to maintain public health. Even Rambert eventually sets aside his personal pursuits to help combat the epidemic alongside others. The strength of these characters is not in the belief of a final victory or a thought-out cosmic plan, but in doing what is honorable in the face of unfair suffering. Camus drives home the idea that the plague, like any epidemic, will run its course with or without human intervention. Diseases move along their natural paths, barely influenced by human actions. The novel doesn't glorify these characters for saving Oren. Instead, it remembers them for refusing to accept unnecessary suffering. They understand that while they can't cheat death or prevent every tragedy, they can ease the suffering of those around them. These characters engage in the fight, not in anticipation of victory or with the despair of inevitable defeat, but because it's just the right thing to do. Their actions hold value just because they exist, not necessarily for what they might achieve. In Iran, the outbreak brings about a rare sense of unity among individuals. Normally, social differences would create divides, but when facing a common threat, things like wealth, education, and religious beliefs fade into the background. Everyone is breathing the same harmful air and confronting the same serious risk. The epidemic makes people realize they're all in the same boat, human beings needing each other to survive. Camus describes this as a shared suffering that transcends traditional barriers of class, culture, and religion. However, this unity doesn't form automatically. It's something that happens when people actively choose to acknowledge their shared circumstances and look out for one another. Some people in Iran react to the epidemic by becoming more withdrawn and self-centered, hoarding supplies and isolating themselves. On the flip side, others discover unexpected reserves of compassion and courage. The plague doesn't inherently make people good or bad, but it certainly reveals their potential when usual social structures crumble, pushing them to face life's essential questions. Dr. Ryu exemplifies Camus' notion of confronting senseless suffering the right way. He's a doctor not because he believes medicine can solve all human issues, but because healing is a fundamentally human act, restoring dignity amidst illness and death. He treats patients, knowing full well that some might not survive regardless of his efforts. He meticulously documents the outbreak, aware that future generations
could encounter similar challenges. Despite being enveloped in widespread tragedy impacting many, he never loses sight of individual lives. His commitment is both modest and complete. He does what he can with what he has, without overreaching. The plague also acts as a metaphor for the Nazi occupation of France, a period Camus directly experienced as part of the resistance. Much like the plague, Nazism spread cruelty through entire societies, unraveling moral and social ties, forcing people to choose between complicity, escape, or resistance. It compelled individuals to clarify what was important to them and consider the sacrifices they were willing to make to defend those principles. The narrative suggests that countering any destructive force, be it a literal epidemic or political oppression, requires the same qualities: unity, persistence, and readiness to act without guaranteed success. Yet, the plague isn't solely about massive events like epidemics or wars. It's also about the everyday struggles that impact all human lives: illness, aging, loss, and death. Each person faces a sort of disconnection from definitive answers about existence and purpose. We continually manage threats to our health, relationships, and plans that remain beyond our complete control or comprehension. The plague echoes the fundamental human condition of vulnerability to forces we cannot wholly understand or command. The lessons the characters learn about solidarity and resistance are not reserved for monumental crises, but are pertinent to the daily challenge of living authentically in an unpredictable world. Part 10. When the universe doesn't come with a built-in moral guide and human logic struggles to pin down absolute right or wrong, how do we know what's ethical? How can we set up sound moral principles when they seem to float on shaky ground? Camus gives the idea that without a divine presence, we'd slide into moral chaos or a free-for-all where anything goes. Instead, he argues that we can carve out ethical goodness from our life experiences, sans celestial approval or an outside green light. The big idea here is that moral values aren't discovered like scientific truths, but are crafted through our choices and commitments. Not that they're just random whims, since some values genuinely bolster human thriving, while others erode it. Some ways of living promote respect and community, whereas others sow harm and loneliness. We can assess different ethical ideas based on their real-world effects on people's lives. The kind of ethics Camus talks about is unique in a few ways. First, it's deeply rooted in human living, not abstract theorizing. We find what matters by looking at what we're unwilling to bear, what we'd stand by, and what we'd let go for our beliefs. Our values emerge in how we act in specific situations, not by mapping them out from broad principles. Because of this, ethics is viewed as a continuous journey, not a static rulebook. We don't start out with a complete set of beliefs to apply everywhere. Rather, life's challenges reveal what we truly stand for. Second, although Camus' ethical standpoint is broadly applicable, he doesn't claim it as the ultimate truth. When we oppose unacceptable circumstances, it's likely that anyone put in our place would feel similarly. Our stand against wrongs comes from values that stretch beyond personal preferences or self-interest. Instead of selfishly saying we deserve better, we assert that all humans do. This gives our ethical standpoint a universal flavor, without assuming we grasp the ultimate truth of it all.
We can dub actions as right or wrong without fully deciphering why they are so. Third, his vision of ethics is marked by humility and awareness of its limits. It isn't here to fix every moral dilemma or end ethical arguments. It acknowledges that moral clarity is never 100%, and ethical decisions often mean navigating between tough, competing values. It sees that decent folks might disagree on major issues, and while moral progress is possible, completion is out of reach. This humility is a shield against the kind of moral pride that claims to have all the answers about good and evil, which can justify questionable actions in pursuit of so-called perfect goals. Fourth, an important aspect of Camus' ethics is that the means must line up with the ends. You can't foster a kinder world with brutality. Justice can't be furthered using unjust means, nor can freedom be gained by oppressing others. The method we use to achieve goals becomes entwined with those goals, shaping the results and ourselves in the process. This guiding principle provides practical wisdom for ethical decision-making without needing heaps of theory. We can evaluate whether actions are consistent with the desired outcomes they claim to serve. These concepts have a significant impact on how we interact with others and build our societies. If human dignity is tied to our capacity to make choices and stand firm against what we find unbearable, our communities should be structured to protect and enhance these abilities. When we realize that we're all in the same boat, mortal souls in an indifferent universe, it makes sense to stand up against any systems that create divisions and rank people by their worth. Real change comes from embracing the ability to challenge power structures, so we should value political systems that let us do just that. Camus dives deep into ethics, and this ties into how we view justice. Our idea of justice isn't perfect, because we humans don't have all the answers and can make mistakes. Yet, we can gauge justice by its ability to uphold human dignity and ensure that people have true freedom to make choices. A just society isn't about wiping out all suffering or solving every problem, but about lessening unnecessary pain and addressing real grievances, allowing room for rebellion that builds rather than destroys. Camus backs democratic systems for a reason. They aren't about delivering perfection, but they're the best at setting things right over the long haul. Democracies let folks legally question authority, push for changes peacefully, and keep leaders in check. They're structured to enable leadership shifts without chaos and protect the rights of minorities from being steamrolled by the majority. They might not be flawless, yet they're better than those systems where power is dominated by people claiming to know the ultimate justice. Camus places a lot of importance on individual rights, not because they outweigh community interests, but because protecting individuals is vital to building a true community. Freedoms like speech, thought, and gathering are essential, as they enable people to express and share their deepest values. Without these freedoms, real rebellion or meaningful community ties can't exist. Societies that quash individual rights for collective aims usually harm both personal dignity and true community welfare. This spirit of revolt also spills over into our personal lives and actions. If we care about being real, we should be honest about what we feel and why we act. If standing together matters, we need to be there for others who are going through similar struggles. If we value dignity, we must treat people as individuals, not just means to our ends. If rebelling is key, we have to say no to situations we can't accept, even if it's difficult or costly. But Camus doesn't hand us a manual for every life's conflict or a one-size-fits-all solution for every ethical dilemma. His ethics call for smart decision-making, ongoing reassessment, and a willingness to own our choices. It's about shaping our values through our actions, not just thinking them over. It asks us to be true to our paths while remaining open to learning from others, encouraging an engaged, involved approach rather than a distant, closed-off one. It might not give absolute certainty, but it offers a way to live with integrity and purpose, even in a universe that doesn't care about our trials. Part 11. Art and Creation as Acts of Rebellion. Like everyone else, artists exist in this world where big questions often go unanswered and ultimate meaning is elusive. But instead of surrendering to despair or clinging to illusions, they bring something fresh into existence. They turn their life experiences into works that resonate with people across different eras and cultures. By doing so, they demonstrate how human thought can impose a bit of order on chaos, possibly making sense of what initially seems pointless. Creating art is akin to Sisyphus rolling his boulder up a hill. Artists know their creations won't last forever, won't solve life's greatest mysteries, or serve any purpose beyond themselves. Yet they continue because the act of creating holds intrinsic value, regardless of the outcome. Whether it's a writer spinning a tale, a painter crafting an image, or a musician putting together a melody, these acts emphasize the significance of awareness and choice in an indifferent world. Still, Camus points out that not all art truly rebels. Some art becomes a form of escapism, building worlds that provide false comfort rather than truly addressing our reality. Romantic art can act like a soothing drug, painting life as prettier than it is, while religious art, promising transcendence, might actually dodge truly understanding our human condition. Even art centered on politics might miss the mark, getting lost in ideology at the cost of real human stories, which are the heart of art's impact. To Camus, authentic art strikes a careful balance. It faces life's difficulties head-on while still celebrating human potential. It doesn't deceive us into thinking life is inherently more meaningful, nor does it sink into bitterness. It acknowledges suffering without being consumed by it, understands constraints without being trapped, and comes to terms with mortality without becoming preoccupied. Great art enhances our grasp of our own situation while also shining a spotlight on the beauty and dignity still accessible to us. Camus sees this equilibrium in artists he holds dear, ranging from ancient Greeks to more contemporary authors. Greek tragedies, for example, show people caught in no-win situations, enduring great suffering, yet still anchoring concepts of human dignity and beauty within the universe. These dramas don't offer straightforward resolutions, but they reveal that even amid tragedy, humans can exhibit courage and dignity. They uphold our power to choose and be aware, which makes the play's tragic aspects possible in the first place. Likewise, Camus appreciates storytellers like Dostoevsky, who delve into the bleakest facets of human existence without forsaking belief in human potential.
Dostoevsky's narratives confront moral quandaries, deep psychological pain, and soul-searching enigmas. Yet his works celebrate life instead of plunging into despair. They feature characters grappling with life's substantial questions, portraying both human fallibility and greatness, proving that the quest for meaning remains worthwhile even if it doesn't provide definitive answers. Artists who genuinely defy life's absurdity create works that help others live more authentically within their own absurd realities. They don't hand out quick fixes or false expectations, but deliver something meaningful, the realization that others have battled similar existential conflicts and have managed to retain their integrity and humanity. Truly remarkable art bridges spans of time and distance, creating connections with people we'll never encounter, but whose lives and struggles continue to speak to us. Camus helps us see that we're not tackling life's challenges all by ourselves, even when those challenges don't come with a clear fix. He treats art as something that adds value to our lives, kind of like how making choices makes us moral beings. We each set the rules of art through what we make and how we respond to what others create. There's no universal judge out there to definitively call art good or bad, meaningful or not. Instead, we have to engage with art and ponder its significance to determine these standards. This doesn't mean our evaluation of art is just random or a matter of personal preference. Some artworks indeed do a better job of helping us grasp our reality, see new possibilities, and connect with others. Certain artists display more talent, a deeper understanding, or a more authentic involvement with their creations compared to others. We can evaluate art based on its impact on real people in the real world. But these judgments are our own to make, not borrowed from others or based on unchanging rules. When it comes to art making, it requires the same kind of attention to reality that Camus champions in his philosophy. Artists have to dig into the tangible elements of their craft, like the particularities of words, colors, or sounds that bring their work to life. They can't create meaningful art by strictly following abstract formulas or pursuing purely theoretical objectives. Artists need to stay rooted in their sensory experiences, emotional truths, and the hands-on aspects of their work. This links artistic creation to the authentic engagement with life that Camus believes is crucial in other areas. Also, when an artist confronts the absurdity of life, they create work that resonates with others instead of retreating into personal bubbles or convoluted theories. Camus values art that speaks to universal human experiences and dilemmas, not because he aims for the lowest common denominator, but because he thinks real art emanates from and connects with our common existence as aware beings in an indifferent world. Art that strays too far from everyday human contexts loses its power to illuminate those experiences or offer comfort to people facing their own absurdities. An artist also shows that you can find happiness and fulfillment in activities that don't need grand explanations. The joy that comes from creating something beautiful, solving artistic puzzles, or effectively communicating with an audience are all rewarding experiences that don't rely on external validation or cosmic significance. They show how we can flourish by embracing our nature and talents, rather than adhering to obligations set by outside forces. This mindset provides a way to live the rest of our lives, finding meaning through the act itself, not just by chasing after predefined objectives.
Part 12. Camus' political ideas weren't born from sitting around thinking deep thoughts. They came from his life experiences with injustice, violence, and the moral dilemmas that pop up when you try to confront them. Growing up in French-ruled Algeria, he saw firsthand the chaos of colonialism, with Europeans and the native Arab and Berber populations often at odds. Later, during World War II, he worked as a journalist and joined the French resistance, where he navigated the tricky territory of using violence for a supposedly noble cause. From these experiences, he learned that politics isn't just about ideals. It's about real people's struggles and how good intentions can sometimes backfire. Camus's ties to Algeria and the independence debate shed light on both his political insights and blind spots. He truly cared about justice for Arabs and consistently opposed unjust colonial practices. As a young journalist, he brought attention to the harsh conditions faced by Arab workers and advocated for political and economic reforms. He imagined a future where French and Arab Algerians coexisted in fairness and dignity. However, support for Algerian independence didn't sit right with him, largely because he feared for the safety of Europeans like his mother, who lived in Algeria. This view clashed with those who instinctively supported anti-colonial movements. Camus believed the issue was too complicated for a simple narrative of good versus evil. He pointed out that many European settlers, including his working-class family, had lived in Algeria for generations and saw it as their home. He feared that independence might lead to targeting innocent civilians and worried that revolutionary nationalism could simply replace one form of tyranny with another. When Camus famously said he'd choose his mother over abstract justice, people misunderstood him. He didn't mean that family should always come before moral principles, but rather that justice isn't true justice if it harms innocent people. He believed any solution to the Algerian conflict should protect everyone and respect everyone's rights, not favor one side. This was tied to his broader belief that the means to achieving a just society should not themselves be unjust. The Algerian struggle also fed into Camus's distrust of grand revolutionary ideologies and quick-fix solutions to political issues. He observed that movements beginning with good intentions could morph into extreme crusades without tolerance for disagreement. Algerian nationalists, like other revolutionaries, thought they were on the right side of history and justified violence as a necessary evil for future justice. Camus understood their motivations, but was concerned about the possible outcomes, influenced by his observations elsewhere. He noted how the Russian Revolution's promise of worker freedom resulted in greater oppression, and how the French Revolution's human rights rhetoric led to bloodshed and despotic rule. Even the most noble of movements could lose sight of their foundational ideals. Camus sought ways to combat wrongs that wouldn't simply perpetuate them elsewhere. He favored fixing things over tearing them apart, advocated for gradual progress rather than abrupt changes, and prioritized individual rights over broad collective gains. He supported trade unions, democratic socialism, and international organizations focused on addressing injustices through legal and peaceful means. He believed that for any real transformation to take root, it wasn't just about swapping out who was in charge. It was really about getting into people's hearts and minds. He argued that violence, no matter how noble the cause, typically ended up stripping away the humanity from both those who used it and those it was used against. He favored a slower approach that honored human dignity over racing toward goals that required giving up lives now for dreams later. This viewpoint often put him at odds with other leftist thinkers, particularly Jean-Paul Sartre and his followers. During the heated times of the Cold War, terms like engagement and commitment became politically charged, pushing intellectuals to take sides. Sartre was firm in his belief that there was no room for indecision, asserting that not choosing was essentially siding with the current state of affairs. He viewed violent revolution as a necessary means to a just world and saw Camus' stance as naive, putting moral ideals ahead of tangible liberation. Camus, on the other hand, argued that staying neutral in the struggle between different oppressive regimes wasn't just taking the easy way out. He proposed a third way, challenging injustice without aligning with any revolutionary dogmas. He supported certain reforms and battles, but steered clear of broad theories about historical destiny or perfect outcomes. Camus believed intellectuals should stay independent and speak truthfully to all parties, rather than becoming puppets for any political agenda. The disagreement with Sartre wasn't solely political, it turned personal, ending their friendship and leaving lasting wounds. Sartre charged Camus with forsaking the working class and upholding existing oppressive systems, to which Camus retorted that Sartre twisted the truth and would justify anything for so-called greater goals. This dispute reflected wider tensions within Europe's left about addressing injustice in a world split between capitalism and communism, both offering partial and flawed solutions to human problems. Camus' perspective was also shaped by his experiences during the Nazi occupation and the resistance. He saw with his own eyes how pressure could transform ordinary people into either collaborators or heroes, based on the choices they made. From this, he understood that good and evil weren't just abstract ideas, but directly tied to real human actions at specific times. He recognized the crucial role of personal courage and moral clarity when social structures collapsed and typical rules no longer applied. This led him to believe it wasn't just about the political systems, but about the character of the individuals in charge. Democracies couldn't promise justice if the people didn't uphold democratic values, and revolutions couldn't deliver real freedom if they compromised that freedom for other purposes. Ultimately, the quality of political life depended on the moral strength of individuals and their willingness to take responsibility for their choices. Camus emphasized the importance of moral education and cultural development alongside political change. He thought lasting political shifts required people to reevaluate their interactions and what it meant to be accountable members of society. In his eyes, literature, art, and philosophy were vital in helping people become more empathetic, morally conscious, and respectful of human dignity. Without this moral growth, politics would likely recycle old errors in new guises. Part 13. Albert Camus always carried a special connection with the Mediterranean. He saw the area's landscapes and cultures as a kind of antidote to the political chaos and depression that marked 20th century Europe. To him, Mediterranean living meant embracing the present instead of overthinking life, enjoying life's simple pleasures rather than overanalyzing everything, and going for balance instead of chasing wild extremes. And it wasn't just him being nostalgic about his younger days or getting dreamy about his homeland. He truly believed that living within certain limits could lead to a more honest and joyful life. In his writings, you'll often see the Mediterranean sun as a metaphor for experiencing life head-on, cutting through endless philosophical debates. Under the fierce North African sun, worrying about life's meaning takes a backseat to finding shade or a drink of water. The sun encourages focusing on the here and now, addressing the immediate needs of the body rather than spiraling into deep thoughts. It sets the stage for enjoying life's simpler sides rather than getting tangled up in complicated philosophies. Camus appreciated intellectual thinking, but he insisted it remained tied to real life, pointing out that philosophy often drifted away from the real experiences that inspired those big questions. In his view, Mediterranean traditions, with their hearty foods, wines, conversations, and joys of the flesh, reminded people that life's foundation lies in physical and social experiences, not just thoughts. The natural desires and joys of the body offered a unique wisdom, balancing pure logic. Through the lens of Mediterranean culture, Camus found a way of life he termed lucid indifference. This meant accepting life's difficult truths without being overwhelmed by them. Despite facing centuries of wars, hardships, and natural catastrophes, these cultures found ways to celebrate life rather than dwelling on suffering. They cultivated hospitality, festive gatherings, art, and community, allowing people to thrive even in tough circumstances. They accepted the harshness of reality, yet found ways to find joy nonetheless. Camus was particularly drawn to how Mediterranean cultures perceived time differently than the fast-paced, ticking clock mentality of the modern industrial world. They favored nature's cycles over straight timelines, the changing of seasons over strict schedules, and took time to pause instead of racing forward. They saw value in contemplation and savoring the moment, while productivity-driven societies often misunderstood these as laziness. For Camus, this take on time seemed more healthy and humane than the relentless pursuit of progress typical of Northern Europe and the U.S. He wasn't blind to the Mediterranean's shortcomings, like poverty, inequality, and political turmoil. He acknowledged that some traditional practices could be limiting, especially toward women and minorities. But he wasn't calling for a full-on return to the past or ignoring advancements in technology, medicine, and democracy. He believed in adopting aspects of Mediterranean culture that could enrich and humanize modern life without losing its benefits. This Mediterranean approach also influenced Camus' views on addressing political and social issues. Historically, these cultures leaned toward dialogue, finding middle grounds, and making compromises, not going for full-on domination or seeking total victories. They nurtured lifestyles where different ethnic and religious groups coexisted, not perfectly, but better than the ethnic nationalism and strict ideologies that fueled Europe's 20th century troubles. This showed him that diversity was a strength, not a weakness, and that different ways of life could complement each other instead of being threats. Camus saw the Mediterranean as offering a middle path between Northern Europe's extreme rationalism and the deep mysticism in some Eastern traditions. Mediterranean culture valued reason without putting it above other human qualities. It embraced mystery and transcendence, but didn't let those distract from critical thinking or solving real-world issues. This balanced approach allowed people to remain truly human, avoiding the extremes of living solely as minds or spirits.
To Camus, the Mediterranean ideal also influenced how people should interact with nature. Over the years, these cultures adapted to their landscapes and climates, learning to flow with nature rather than trying to control or oppose it entirely. They demonstrated a way of living that was both sustainable and content, without the need to exploit the environment or reject technology altogether. These cultures proved that people could feel at ease in the world without having to reshape it to suit human desires. Camus valued Mediterranean principles and believed that connecting with specific places and cultures was crucial for people to truly flourish. While the broad, often disconnected nature of modern intellectual life brought some advantages, it also risked creating a kind of spiritual detachment, making it harder to truly engage with life. People needed a sense of belonging, connections to traditions and landscapes that built a strong identity, essential for authentic rebellion and deep solidarity. Nonetheless, for Camus, these roots should be thoughtfully chosen and not just blindly inherited. The Mediterranean way he admired was about being grounded without shutting oneself off, respecting tradition without being rigid, and honoring the past without being trapped by it. This approach offered a way to live well without strict ideologies or heavy metaphysical commitments. It promoted finding happiness and meaning in the present, fostering personal relationships and savoring nature's beauty. These wishes were modest, not claiming to offer ultimate fulfillment, but capable of providing genuine happiness to those open to exploring their limits and potentials. This Mediterranean view also influenced Camus' writing and artistic preferences. He valued clarity over confusion, concrete thoughts over vague ones, and preferred subtle emotions to exaggerated ones. His writing strived for clear simplicity, much like Mediterranean architecture, which emphasized functional beauty that addressed human needs without unnecessary frills or complexity. He believed that true art, like meaningful living, should be tied to everyday human experiences and accessible to people without specialized training in art or philosophy. Part 14. In Albert Camus' final novel, The Fall, he takes a deep dive into his growing thoughts on humanity, our moral responsibilities, and what it means to live genuinely. The book is framed as a kind of confession where Jean-Baptiste Clémence, a former lawyer from Paris who's now a judge penitent in the bars of Amsterdam, shares his mind. Through Clémence's extensive monologue, we see how our good intentions and strong beliefs can become twisted by pride, self-deception, and a need to feel superior. At first, Clémence talks about his previous life as a successful lawyer who championed the underdog. He didn't charge for his services, supported noble causes, and built a reputation as a defender of justice and human rights. He saw himself as the hero, a shining example of morality in a world filled with confusion and compromise. He thrived on the admiration of others and the sense that he was genuinely making a difference, considering himself a moral crusader standing strong in a corrupt society. But as he goes on, Clémence confesses that even his most altruistic actions were partly about elevating himself above others. Sure, helping was the right thing to do, but it also polished his self-image and placed him high above those who weren't as generous. His image of virtue brought him perks and societal status. Even when he was deeply committed to justice, it was tangled with pride and a tendency to look down on those who didn't measure up morally. Then he faces a transformative moment when he witnesses a woman jump off a bridge into the Seine and does nothing to help. He hears her scream, watches her leap, but stays rooted to the spot. He rationalizes it. Too late, too cold, he couldn't have saved her anyway. But deep inside, he knows it was all about self-preservation, clashing with everything he claimed to stand for. This incident forces him to confront the gap between his self-perception and his actions when tested. Camus describes this as his fall from innocence. This revelation makes him recognize the selfishness and moral hollowness in his past actions. What he once viewed as noble now seems like self-serving ego boosts and manipulation. His entire self-image of being the good guy crumbles as he sees the self-deception in his most lauded deeds. Overwhelmed by this insight, Camus adopts a new approach to life and work. He becomes a judge who confesses, using his mistakes to prompt others to scrutinize their own. His candidness about his flaws encourages others to reflect, creating a space where he highlights others' weaknesses. His confession, rather than being a humble act, becomes a tool to challenge others' moral conceit, implying they're no better than him. This kind of honesty lets him maintain a moral advantage, using modesty as a twisted form of pride and self-critique as a way to assert dominance over those less open about their own failings. Clemence's way of thinking reveals a clever but pessimistic brand of moral reasoning. It acknowledges human weaknesses, but uses that as an excuse to avoid genuine moral obligations. By claiming everyone is equally flawed, he eliminates the possibility of making meaningful ethical judgments. By laying bare his sins, he gets to judge others without facing judgment himself. Accepting his imperfections, he avoids the hard work of striving to live more righteously despite them. His worldview offers the false comfort of cynicism, lacking the honesty of true despair or the bravery of genuine rebellion. Through The Fall, Camus illustrates the dangers when recognizing life's absurdity leads not to authentic rebellion, but to cunning deceit and moral escapism. In Clemens, we see a man who has learned just enough about humanity to become cynical, but not enough to develop true understanding. He's noticed people flaunting their morals without actually understanding them, pointing out others' flaws, but not really owning up to how he fits in with those same flaws. He's got this fake wisdom that treats people's imperfections as an excuse to skip the moral effort altogether. The novel dives into how dangerous it is to be morally arrogant, showing how true virtue can get messed up when we pat ourselves on the back too much. Clemens used to truly fight for justice, but his craving to feel superior messed that up. His downfall wasn't from not having virtue. It was pride slipping into his decency and making him shaky when things got tough. This story whispers that being ethically sound means more than having good intentions. It involves genuinely understanding who you are and being ready to act without fishing for praise. Amsterdam, with its winding canals and misty atmosphere, perfectly mirrors the murky morals and self-deception that Camus embodies and picks apart. The city's blend of city and nature, land and water, with its looping waterways, gives a sense that you're stuck, going in circles with no clear exit. The foggy streets obscure clarity, making it hard to find your way. Everything in Amsterdam feels a bit dreamlike and morally gray, just like Clemence's mental space as he narrates his tale. The Fall is Camus
at his most bleak regarding human nature and moral capability. Unlike earlier works that held on to hope for rebellion and genuine friendship, this one suggests even our best moral efforts can get spoiled by ego, self-trickery, and our unending need to feel above others. It questions if living morally is just a way to sidestep life's real hurdles. The book wonders if true virtue is possible for people who are aware of their own goodness and get a thrill from their own good deeds. Yet, it's not all negative. By showcasing Clemence's clever dodges and moral trickery, it subtly directs us towards more honest ways to grapple with moral difficulties and human weaknesses. By pointing out the dangers of moral vanity, it suggests actions driven by love, not superiority. As it explores poor judgment, it leans towards compassion that doesn't judge. The Fall serves as a warning for anyone trying to stay ethical but doesn't close the door on the chance for genuine moral action. Part 15. Tragically, Camus' life was cut short in 1960 due to a car accident when he was only 46 years old, and his influence was at its height. Losing him meant losing a powerful voice that tackled big moral and political dilemmas. Despite a brief career, his ideas still speak to today's thinkers questioning similar issues. How can we keep our self-respect in a universe seemingly devoid of meaning? How do we resist injustice without becoming unjust? How can we build connections with others while keeping our unique selves intact? Interestingly, Camus' thoughts have only become more meaningful over time. The strong ideologies that shaped 20th century politics have mostly faded away, leaving many people looking for solutions to societal problems without clinging to rigid beliefs. The environmental crisis now forces us to rethink how we interact with our planet right away. As globalization connects us in new ways, it also leaves many feeling isolated or estranged. Similarly, technology offers new possibilities, but also threatens privacy and autonomy. Amid these pressing issues, Camus's focus on rebellion that doesn't cross ethical lines, his emphasis on the real human journey rather than dry theory, and his commitment to balancing individual dignity with societal togetherness all offer incredibly useful perspectives. Many of today's political movements are reflecting back on ideas Camus first discussed. For instance, during the American Civil Rights era, his view of rebellion as an affirmation of universal human dignity, not just group-specific interests, was evident. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. demonstrated how to fight injustice while upholding the very values they fought for. The solidarity movements in Eastern Europe during the 1980s showed how ordinary people united against oppressive regimes by refusing to live untruthfully, something Camus ardently advocated. Environmentalists have found resonance in his critique of humanity's relentless push for control over nature, supporting his call for a more balanced and sustainable way of living with the earth. In critiquing today's movements, we can use Camus' ideas to point out when they stray from their true mission. His thoughts on the evolution of rebellion into revolution offer a lens to examine if social justice efforts risk becoming oppressive. Camus emphasized the importance of aligning methods with goals so that we can evaluate if our approaches truly advance our intended objectives. Furthermore, his warnings against moral absolutism and rigid dogmas provide valuable insights for movements that might be teetering on the edge of becoming intolerant. In today's tech-heavy world, Camus' philosophy is particularly relevant. With social media and digital platforms comes enhanced connectivity, but also greater opportunities for manipulation and surveillance. Advances in AI and biotechnology hold promise, but also force us to question essential aspects of human identity and the limits we ought not to cross. The stark reality of climate change and environmental harm makes us confront the consequences of humanity's drive to dominate nature, something Camus critiqued. His stress on setting boundaries while maintaining human dignity amid tech advancements brings crucial viewpoints to the table. Camus's work continues to draw readers who find themselves reflected in his exploration of existential alienation, the quest for authenticity, and the search for meaning in a world that seems to lack it. The Stranger speaks to those who feel alienated from a society that often seems pointless or insincere. The Plague strikes a chord with anyone who's lived through societal collapse, prompting fresh reflection on what truly counts. And The Fall pushes readers to face their motivations and ethical facades with unflinching transparency. These works pack a punch not by giving us quick-fix solutions or making us feel all cozy inside. Nope, they make us take a good hard look at our lives and the choices we make. Camus kicked off a way of thinking that still resonates today. Modern thinkers keep this vibe going by focusing on human decency, steering clear of big, catch-all ideas, and paying more attention to real-world stuff over pie-in-the-sky theories. Feminist thinkers have taken Camus' ideas about rebellion and run with it, applying them to tackle issues like male dominance and gender injustice. Meanwhile, those studying post-colonialism have used his skepticism about revolutions to examine freedom movements in developing nations. On another front, environmental philosophers have twisted his critique of human overconfidence into a strong argument against human-centered thinking and wasteful economic practices. Now, while Camus' philosophy has solid foundations, it's not perfect, and today's thinkers find plenty to critique. His focus on personal rebellion and being true to oneself sometimes misses the importance of standing up as a group. His love for Mediterranean values and European culture can seem a bit limited in our diverse world. Even though his take on revolutionary movements offers important insights, it might also dissuade people from speaking against oppression. While he offers a great personal ethical guide, his views don't quite fill the bill for societal change. These gaps don't take away from the value of his thoughts. They just show where other ideas can give his philosophy a needed boost. Today's readers have the job of learning from him and adapting his insights to new challenges he couldn't anticipate. It's all about taking that same flair for creative rebellion he cherished, rejecting easy answers, and building new paths for human dignity and togetherness. Perhaps Camus's most enduring contribution is showing us how to live with purpose and integrity without having all the answers to life's toughest questions. He made it plain that people can find meaning and worth in their actions and commitments, even if the universe isn't giving them a pat on the back. He showed you don't need perfect wisdom or the promise of ending suffering to stand against wrongs and pain. Through his lens, solidarity and compassion grow from recognizing our shared limitations, not from some all-encompassing truth. In today's world filled with conflict, extremes, and ideological bickering, Camus offers a different path for resolving disagreements. Instead of demanding others see things our way, we can connect through our shared doubts, mortality, and the common quest for dignity. Instead of gunning for flawless solutions to complex problems, we can aim for small, meaningful changes that ease suffering and expand the opportunities for a good life. The image of Sisyphus endlessly pushing that boulder uphill only to watch it roll down again embodies the human struggle as Camus sees it. We're all, in a way, rolling our own boulders, whether it's raising kids who will face their own fights, building structures that will one day fall apart, creating art that might eventually be forgotten, or battling injustices that keep cropping up in new forms. The key question isn't whether we can win forever, but whether we can find pride and fulfillment in the effort itself. Camus' answer is yes, if we choose to live with honesty, courage, and solidarity. His philosophy doesn't promise ultimate comfort, neat answers, or predictable outcomes, but it offers something possibly more precious, a way to hold on to our humanity in a world that often feels like it's pushing against it. It serves as a nudge to remind us that we have the ability to face the absurdities of life without losing ourselves to absurdity. We have the strength to fight against unfairness without becoming unfair ourselves. We can also infuse the world with beauty and purpose, even if we know these elements may not last forever. At the core of it, this might just be the most profound rebellion available to us, not letting an indifferent universe dictate how we respond. Although we might not have a say in the situations we find ourselves in, we do have control over how we choose to handle them. It's in making that choice that we discover both our freedom and our sense of dignity as conscious individuals who opt for engaging with life, even when quitting seems like the simpler path.